The metallic corridors of Ethelberg Space Station creaked and groaned under the weight of time and neglect. Once a proud outpost on the edge of colonial space, it had devolved into little more than a rusting refuge for those with nowhere else to go. The station's artificial atmosphere tasted of decay and desperation, a blend of recycled air that had passed through too many lungs and machinery that had been repaired one too many times. In the cramped agricultural sector of the station, Kalen Matthews tended to his hydroponics garden with the precision of a surgeon. His calloused hands moved methodically among the verdant leaves, checking nutrient levels and adjusting light panels with practiced ease. The garden was a stark contrast to the rest of the station, vibrant, alive, purposeful. It was his sanctuary, the only place where the ghosts of his past seemed to quiet down. As a former military medic who had served in the brutal interstellar war, Kalen carried wounds that no regenerative therapy could heal. The garden and his small repair shop were his self-prescribed treatment, a quiet existence away from the violence and moral compromises that had defined his earlier life. He spoke little, worked much, and avoided the entanglements of station politics and social circles. Kalen, just the man I was looking for. The booming voice shattered the peaceful hum of the hydroponics room. Kalen didn't need to look up to know who had invaded his space. Zark Velius, smuggler, black market dealer, and self-proclaimed entrepreneur, was as subtle as a supernova. The heavy thud of mag boots announced his approach across the metal flooring. Not interested, Zark, Kalen replied without taking his eyes off the delicate sprouts he was transplanting. Not even going to ask what I'm offering? That's not very hospitable. Zark leaned against a nutrient tank, his synthetic leather jacket creaking. His cybernetic eye whirred quietly as it adjusted to the bright grow lights. Last time I accepted anything from you, I spent 3 days detoxing from whatever was in that premium whiskey. Zark laughed, a sound like gravel in a processor. That was a misunderstanding. But this is different. This is me settling my debt to you for fixing my ship's life support last month. Remember? When station security was breathing down my neck. Kalen finally looked up, his expression weary. I told you then, I don't want payment. I do the same for anyone. But I insist. Zark snapped his fingers, and a figure stepped forward from the shadows of the corridor. She was unmistakably Xylosian, her lavender skin with its subtle iridescence, the elegant, elongated fingers, and the characteristic crest that began at her forehead and swept backward like a living crown. But where Xylosians were known for their expressive eyes and proud bearing, this one's gaze was vacant, her posture submissive. She wore a simple, gray jumpsuit with embedded control circuits visible at the wrists and neck. A Lyra model, Zark announced proudly. Top-tier companion and worker, genetically engineered for adaptability, intelligence, and, he winked his organic eye, total compliance. Worth at least 6 months of my best contraband. Kalen's hands stilled among the plants. His expression hardened from weariness to disgust. You're giving me a slave. Engineer companion, Zark corrected, unfazed. Perfectly legal in 7 systems. Not in this one. Details, details. No one enforces those regulations here anyway. Zark pulled a small control device from his pocket and held it out. All the basic commands are pre-programmed. She'll learn your preferences quickly. Quite the conversation piece, too. Not many Lyras in this sector. Kalen stood, wiping soil from his hands with deliberate slowness. His voice, when it came, was low and dangerous. Get out. Now, don't be hasty. I said get out. And take her with you. Zark's cybernetic eye narrowed, the pupil contracting to a pinpoint. I'm offering you premium merchandise as payment for a debt. Most men would be grateful. I'm not most men, and she's not merchandise. The smuggler's jovial facade slipped for a moment, revealing the hardened criminal beneath. Fine, your loss, but the debt's settled either way. He tossed the control device onto a nearby workbench and turned to leave. She's your problem now. Sell her if you want. Might even make a profit. When Zark's footsteps had faded, Kalen looked at the Xylosian woman. She hadn't moved, hadn't reacted in any way to the exchange. She simply stood there, hands clasped before her, eyes forward but seeing nothing. Damn it, Kalen muttered. He approached the Xylosian cautiously, as one might a wounded animal. Can you understand me? No response. Not even a flicker of recognition. Kalen sighed and glanced at the control device on the bench, revulsion clear on his face. He had no intention of using it, but he couldn't leave her standing. There indefinitely either. Look, I don't know your name, your real name, not whatever they designated you. I don't want to own you. I don't want to command you. But I can't exactly throw you out into the station either. He ran a hand through his short, graying hair. You can stay here until I figure something out. There's a cot in the back room. Food in the conservator. The Xylosian remained motionless, as responsive as the metal walls around them. With another heavy sigh, Kalen returned to his plants. He felt the weight of curious and judgmental stares from passing station residents over the next few days. Word traveled fast in the closed ecosystem of a space station. The quiet medic who turned down a premium companion became a topic of speculation and mockery in the station's dimly lit bars and communal eating areas. Heard Matthews got himself a Lyra and doesn't even use her, a station tech remarked loudly as Kalen passed by the main mess hall one evening. Maybe he can't get it up anymore, another laughed. War wounds, you know. Waste of good engineering, if you ask me, a third chimed in. Those things cost more than this whole station is worth. Kalen ignored them, as he ignored most station gossip. But the comments gnawed at him more than he wanted to admit. Not because they questioned his virility or intelligence, but because they spoke of the Xylosian woman as a thing, an appliance left unplugged, a resource left untapped. Back in his quarters, he found her exactly where he had left her that morning, standing beside the hydroponics tanks, unmoving, unseeing. For 3 days she had remained in standby mode, requiring no food or water, barely seeming to breathe. It was unnatural, disturbing, and something in Kalen, perhaps the part of him that had once sworn to alleviate suffering, or perhaps simply the basic human impulse toward compassion, couldn't bear it any longer. With reluctance, he picked up the control device from where he had tossed it in a drawer. He studied it briefly, finding the simplest, most basic activation sequence, just enough to allow autonomous function without any compulsory directives. I'm sorry, he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was apologizing to her or to himself for crossing a line he had sworn not to cross. He pressed the sequence. A subtle change came over the Xylosian woman. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, her breathing deepened, and her eyes, large, almond-shaped, with irises the color of twilight, blinked several times in rapid succession. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time, her gaze finally settling on Kalen. Designation, Lyra, 7923, she said, her voice soft and melodic despite the mechanical phrasing. Awaiting instruction, master. Kalen winced. Don't call me that. My name is Kalen. Just Kalen. Understood, Master Kalen. No, not, he sighed. Just Kalen. No, master. She tilted her head slightly, the first sign of anything resembling confusion or curiosity. Parameters unclear. Status of ownership must be established for proper functioning. I'm not your owner. I don't want to be anyone's owner. Kalen set the control device down and pushed it away across the table, a symbolic gesture of rejection. You're here because it's temporarily safer than the alternatives. That's all. The Xylosian processed this information, her expression unchanging. Temporary safekeeping. Understood. How shall I serve during this period? Kalen, you don't need to serve. Just exist. Eat if you're hungry. Sleep if you're tired. He gestured vaguely toward the small living area adjacent to the workshop. The bathroom's through there. Food's in the conservator. Help yourself. She remained still, seemingly unable to process directives that didn't involve service or utility. Kalen sighed. Fine. You can help me tend to plants if you want something to do. Water levels need checking twice daily. Light cycles need monitoring, but only if you want to. One is not a functional parameter, she replied, but she did move toward the hydroponic system, examining the control panel with efficient precision. For the next several days, they existed in an uneasy parallel. Kalen continued his work, repairing the various machines and devices that station residents brought to him, while the woman he now simply called Lyra maintained a minimal existence. She performed basic self-maintenance, eating small amounts when necessary, using the cleansing unit, resting for precisely 6 hours each night cycle, and she checked the plants with mechanical regularity. Kalen observed her from the corner of his eye as he worked, noting how she moved through the world as if it were an obstacle course to be navigated rather than a place to be experienced. There was intelligence in her eyes, that much was clear, but it was leashed, harnessed, directed only toward specific approved channels. The first indication that something was changing came nearly 2 weeks after her arrival. Kalen was working late, recalibrating a tricky atmospheric filter for one of the agricultural domes, when a soft sound caught his attention. Music, an old earth melody he sometimes played while working, was flowing from the ancient speaker system. But he hadn't turned it on. He looked up to see Lyra standing by the control panel, her hand still on the activation switch, her head slightly tilted as she listened. When she noticed his attention, she immediately withdrew her hand. Apologies. The silence was affecting plant growth efficiency. Studies indicate that certain sound frequencies promote cellular activity in vegetation. It was a reasonable explanation, even potentially true, but Kalen sensed something more in her action, a choice that had nothing to do with efficiency. "It's fine," he said. "I like that song." The smallest change crossed her features, perhaps the ghost of relief. The melody contains mathematical patterns that are optimal. Kalen almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a personal preference he had heard from her. Optimal. Right. The next day, she moved a potted medicinal herb that had been struggling under its current light configuration to a different shelf where it would receive less direct exposure. When Kalen asked about it, she simply said it was suffering, not performing suboptimally, not failing to thrive according to metrics. Suffering. Small moments like these accumulated over the following days. Lyra lingering by the viewport during the simulated sunset. Lyra arranging tools in a pattern that was more aesthetic than practical. Lyra gently brushing her fingertips across the leaves of plants as she passed, a gesture with no purpose except, perhaps, the simple pleasure of sensation. Kalen began to speak more often in her presence, at first just thinking aloud about repairs or planting schedules, later sharing minor observations about station life or commenting on news from the colonial networks. Lyra rarely responded directly, but he noticed how she would position herself to hear better, how her movements would slow when he spoke. One evening, as Kalen prepared a simple meal, the station's power grid fluctuated, a common occurrence in the aging infrastructure. The lights dimmed momentarily before the backup system engaged. When they came back on, Kalen was surprised to find Lyra standing protectively near his most delicate seedlings, her body positioned to shield them from any falling debris had the situation worsened. "They're just plants," he said, though his tone held no criticism. Lyra looked at him, then back at the seedlings. "They are alive," she said simply. "All life deserves protection." The words hung in the air between them, layered with meanings neither was ready to address. Kalen felt something shift in his perception of her. Not a dramatic realization, but a quiet acknowledgement of what he had already begun to suspect. Whatever limitations her creators had imposed on her consciousness, Lyra was far more than the sum of her programming. The next morning, Security Officer Branson appeared at Kalen's door, datapad in hand and officiousness radiating from his perfectly pressed uniform. "Routine inspection," he announced without preamble. "We've had reports of unregistered biotechnology in this sector." Kalen knew immediately what, or rather who, the officer was referring to. Station security rarely bothered with routine inspections of anything unless credits were involved. "I'm running a legitimate business here," Kalen said, blocking the doorway with his substantial frame. "All my permits are current." "This isn't about your repair shop, Matthews." Branson made a show of consulting his datapad. "Sources indicate you're in possession of a Class 3 biosynthetic entity without proper registration. That's a serious infraction." "Is it?" Seems like there are plenty of infractions on this station that security chooses to ignore. Branson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Selective enforcement is a reality of limited resources. Now, are you going to cooperate, or do I need to return with backup? Before Kalen could respond, Lyra appeared beside him. Registration query acknowledged, she said in a perfect facsimile of her earlier mechanical tone. This unit is temporarily assigned to maintenance support under Exemption Code 47B of Colonial Statute. Branson blinked, clearly not expecting direct interaction from the biosynthetic entity in question. Exemption Code? Let me check that. He scrolled through his datapad, frowning. Kalen stared at Lyra in barely concealed shock. As far as he knew, there was no such exemption code, certainly nothing he had ever mentioned to her. Here it is, Branson muttered. Temporary assignment for specialized technical support. Must be registered within 30 standard days and less. He looked up, eyes narrowed. This checks out for now, but you'll need proper registration by the end of the month. Fees 500 credits. I'll take care of it, Kalen said, seizing the unexpected reprieve. After the officer left, Kalen turned to Lyra. There's no exemption code 47B, is there? There was, Lyra replied. It was rescinded 3 standard years ago, but remains in the outdated databases used by station security. A pause. I access information when necessary. Kalen's surprise gave way to something like admiration. You lied. I provided information that would achieve the optimal outcome. That's called lying when humans do it. The faintest curve appeared at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but its distant relative. Then I have learned an important human skill. That evening, as they worked side by side, replanting a section of the hydroponics bay, Kalen found himself speaking about his time as a military medic, something he rarely discussed with anyone. He told her about the brutality of the interstellar conflict, the impossible choices he'd faced, the lives he couldn't save. I joined to help people, he said, carefully packing soil around a fragile root system. But in war, even medicine becomes a weapon. Triage becomes a form of killing, deciding who's worth saving and who isn't. He fell silent, lost in memories. After a long moment, Lyra spoke. They designed us with similar principles. Maximum utility. Optimal resource allocation. Her hands continued working with gentle precision. They called it efficiency, but it was also a form of violence. It was the most she had ever said about herself, about what she was and how she had come to be. Kalen looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the engineered servant that Zark had tried to give him, but a person finding her way towards selfhood through the cracks in her programming. Lyra, he said softly, what do you want? She stilled, soil sifting through her fingers onto the workbench. Want, she repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. Yes, not what you're designed for. Not what's optimal. What do you want? I want. She seemed to struggle, the concept itself fighting against her conditioning. I want to stay here. With the plants. With. Her eyes met his. With you. The simple declaration, delivered with such hard-won honesty, struck Kalen with unexpected force. This wasn't programming or conditioning speaking. This was something new, something genuine emerging from within her. Then stay, he said, not as my servant or assistant. Just stay. The moment was interrupted by the harsh buzz of the door alert. Kalen frowned. He rarely received visitors, and never this late in the station cycle. When he opened the door, his frown deepened. Zark stood there, flanked by 2 rough-looking associates Kalen didn't recognize. Evening, Doc, Zark said, his artificial eye glowing faintly in the dim corridor lighting. Hope I'm not interrupting anything cozy. What do you want, Zark? Funny thing, I've had a better offer for the merchandise I so generously gifted you. Zark's smile was all predator. Turns out there's a collector on Proxima Station willing to pay top credit for a Lyra model. Rare programming variant, apparently. So I'm here to reacquire my property. Kalen felt a cold rage building in his chest. She's not property, and she's certainly not yours. Now, let's not complicate things with philosophy. Zark gestured, and his associates stepped forward. I've got the original acquisition documents right here. Legally, she's mine to reclaim. Legal according to whom? The same authorities that would be very interested in your smuggling operation. Zark's smile didn't waver. Don't be difficult, Kalen. You've had your fun playing savior. Hand her over, and we'll call it even. His voice hardened. Or my associates here will have to get persuasive. From behind Kalen, Lyra's voice rang out. I will not go with you. All eyes turned to her as she stepped forward, her stance straight and dignified despite the fear Kalen could sense beneath her composed exterior. Zark laughed, a harsh sound of genuine amusement. It speaks, and with opinions, no less. He pulled out a control device similar to the one he had given Kalen. Unfortunately, Sweetness, you don't get a vote. He pressed a sequence of buttons. Lyra flinched, her hands rising to her temples as the circuits embedded in her skin pulsed with light. Command override. Lyra, 7923, enter compliance mode and follow, Zark ordered. Lyra's body trembled, the conflict between command and will visible in every tense line of her form. No, she whispered, the words strained but defiant. Zark's amusement vanished. That's not possible. He jabbed the device again, entering a longer sequence. Full system reset, authorization Alpha 93. This time, Lyra cried out in pain, collapsing to her knees as the circuits on her neck blazed bright enough to cast shadows. Kalen moved to her, sighed instantly, supporting her trembling form. Stop it, he demanded. You're hurting her. It can't feel pain, Zark snapped, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. It's malfunctioning. Probably your fault. You've always been too soft for your own good. One of Zark's associates, a hulking figure with extensive facial cybernetics, stepped forward. Just grab it and go. We're drawing attention. True enough, a few curious or concerned faces had appeared at neighboring doorways, drawn by the commotion. Most quickly retreated. Station residents knew better than to get involved in other people's problems, but their brief appearance reminded everyone that they weren't alone. Touch her, and I promise you'll regret it, Kalen said, his voice low and dangerous. It was the voice of a man who had seen the worst of war and survived, who knew exactly how fragile life could be and how to end it. The associate hesitated, looking to Zark for confirmation. Before Zark could respond, a new voice joined the confrontation. Is there a problem here, gentlemen? Techmaster Singh, the unofficial leader of the station's engineering guild and a respected figure in the community, stood a few meters away. Behind him were several of his apprentices, all wearing the distinctive tool belts of their profession. Just a business disagreement, Zark said smoothly. Nothing that concerns others. When it happens in our sector, it concerns us. Singh nodded toward Kalen. Matthews has fixed every critical system in this quadrant at least twice. He's one of ours. The unspoken message was clear. The engineers protected their own. Zark's cybernetic eye whirred as he reassessed the situation. What had seemed like an easy retrieval was quickly becoming complicated. Fine. Keep the defective merchandise. He pocketed the control device. But this isn't over, Matthews. Nobody cheats me. After Zark and his associates retreated, Singh approached Kalen, who was still supporting the recovering Lyra. You all right, Matthews? We will be. Thank you. Singh nodded, his expression suggesting he had questions but was too discreet to ask them. If you need anything, the guild's at your disposal. He glanced at Lyra with undisguised curiosity. Both of you. When they were alone again, Kalen helped Lyra to the small couch in his living area. Are you hurt? Those circuits. The pain is subsiding, she assured him, though her hand still occasionally rose to her neck where the embedded technology had flared. My system is rejecting external control. It is unexpected. You fought it. You refused his commands. Lyra nodded slowly. I chose differently. Her eyes met his. Is that? Am I malfunctioning? Kalen took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her smooth skin. No, you're evolving, becoming more than they designed you to be. He smiled, a rare expression that transformed his weathered face. You're becoming yourself. And who is that? She asked, the question holding all the wonder and terror of newly discovered freedom. I don't know, but I look forward to finding out. The days that followed brought a new rhythm to their shared existence. Lyra's movements became more fluid, less measured. She began to make choices without explanation or justification, selecting which plants to tend first, rearranging Kalen's chronically disorganized tools into a system that made sense to her, playing music that pleased her rather than what might theoretically benefit the plants. She asked questions, endless questions, about everything from the station's history to the properties of different repair components to Kalen's favorite foods. Each answer seemed to spark 3 new inquiries, as if her mind were a long-dormant garden suddenly bursting into bloom. Kalen found himself laughing more than he had in years. He shared stories from his past, not just the dark memories of war, but brighter ones of his childhood on a terraformed moon, his first experiences with medicine, the mentor who had taught him to love growing things. One evening, as they shared a meal Lyra had prepared, her first attempt at cooking, featuring vegetables from their garden prepared according to a recipe she had researched, Kalen noticed her watching him with unusual intensity. "Something wrong?" he asked between bites. "I've been observing facial expressions," she said. "Humans communicate much through micro-expressions, subtle changes around the eyes and mouth that indicate emotional states. And what do mine say? That you are content." Her head tilted slightly, but also concerned. "About me, perhaps. About what Zark might do." Kalen couldn't deny it. He's not the type to let things go, especially if he thinks there's profit involved. "Because I am valuable," Lyra said, the statement neither proud nor self-pitying. "A rare programming variant," he said. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're a person, not merchandise." But legally, this station falls under colonial protectorate law, which doesn't recognize sentient beings as property. If Zark wants to push it, he'd have to admit to trafficking in illegal technology. Kalen set down his utensil. But legal arguments probably won't stop him. Credits and force are the only languages he really understands. Lyra considered this. Then we should speak to him in a language he understands. Kalen raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "I have been accessing the station's databases. There's information there, shipment records, security logs, transaction histories, that would be quite valuable to certain parties, including information about Zark's operations." "You've been hacking the station's systems?" Kalen couldn't hide his surprise. "Ow!" Lyra's expression held a hint of what might have been pride. "I was designed to interface with various technological systems. It was intended as a service function, but the capability remains even when repurposed." "Blackmail, then," Kalen mused. "It's risky. If Zark feels cornered, he might become more dangerous." "Not blackmail. Insurance." Lyra leaned forward. "We will not threaten him directly. We will simply ensure that if anything happens to us, the information is automatically released to colonial enforcement and rival criminal organizations." Kalen stared at her, impressed and a little unnerved by her strategic thinking. "When did you become so pragmatic?" "I've always been pragmatic," she replied. "But now I am pragmatic for my own purposes, not someone else's." The ghost of a smile crossed her lips, another new development. Her expressions were becoming more natural, more human, with each passing day. "Our purposes," Kalen corrected gently. "We're in this together." Together, they implemented Lyra's insurance plan, with help from a reluctantly impressed Techmaster Singh, who provided access to secure communication channels. They sent a simple, factual message to Zark detailing what would happen if either of them were harmed or removed from the station against their will. Days passed with no response, and gradually, the immediate tension eased. Life continued. The hydroponics garden flourished under their combined care. Kalen's repair business expanded as word spread of his exceptional work. Lyra began to develop her own skills, showing a particular aptitude for delicate electronic repairs and theoretical botany. They rarely spoke of her origins anymore. What mattered was not how she had been created, but who she was choosing to become, and who they were becoming together. It was nearly 3 months after Lyra's arrival when the station alert system blared to life, announcing a major atmosphere processing failure in their sector. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off sections of the station as oxygen levels began to drop. Kalen and Lyra moved quickly, following well-rehearsed emergency protocols. They secured the most vulnerable plants under portable atmosphere domes and gathered essential supplies. The main processing unit is 2 junctions away, Kalen said, checking a diagnostic panel. If we can reach it, I might be able to bypass the damaged sections. Oxygen levels are dropping faster than they should, Lyra observed, her enhanced senses more attuned to environmental changes than human perception. This may not be an accident. Kalen's expression darkened. Zark. They made their way through increasingly oxygen-poor corridors, relying on emergency breathing apparatus. When they reached the processing center, their suspicions were confirmed. The control panel had been deliberately sabotaged, and waiting before it was a small communication device. When Kalen activated it, Zark's face appeared in holographic form. "Hello, Doc. Enjoying the fresh air? Or lack thereof?" The smuggler's smile was cold. "Consider this a demonstration of how easily I can reach you, despite your clever little insurance policy." "What do you want, Zark?" Kalen demanded. "The same as before. My property returned, or suitable compensation." The hologram flickered. "The atmospheric system will reset automatically in 30 minutes. Just enough time for you to suffer, but not die. Think of it as a warning shot. Next time, it won't be so gentle." The communication ended. Kalen immediately began working on the damaged controls, but it quickly became apparent that the sabotage was thorough. "He's locked out the manual overrides," Kalen muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "We'll have to wait for the automatic reset, unless we create our own override." Lyra knelt beside the open panel, examining the complex tangle of circuits and conduits. "I can interface directly with the system." "Lyra, no. Those security measures could fry your neural pathways. Not if I'm careful." She looked up at him, her expression resolute. "This is my choice, Kalen. Trust me." After a moment of internal struggle, he nodded. Trust had become the foundation of their relationship, and he wouldn't undermine it now. Lyra placed her hands on the exposed control hub. The circuits embedded in her skin began to glow, not with the harsh light of the override attempt, but with a gentler luminescence as she established connection with the station systems. Her eyes closed in concentration as she navigated the digital landscape. Minutes passed. Kalen's breathing grew labored despite the apparatus as oxygen levels continued to drop. Finally, with a series of mechanical groans and hisses, the ventilation system reactivated. Fresh air began to flow. Lyra disconnected, swaying slightly from the effort. "Done. And I've implemented additional security measures. He won't be able to use this method again." Kalen steadied her, relief and pride mingling in his expression. "You're remarkable, you know that." "I am learning," she replied simply. When they returned to their quarters, they found a message waiting on Kalen's communication terminal. It was from Techmaster Singh, marked urgent. "Matthews," Singh's recorded image said, "your friend Zark made a serious mistake. His little atmospheric stunt endangered critical station systems under Guild protection. The Guild doesn't tolerate that. We've convinced station security to issue an expulsion order. Zark and his associates have 24 hours to leave Ethelberg, or they'll be forcibly removed and blacklisted from all Protectorate stations." A pause. "Consider our way of saying thank you for keeping this rust bucket running all these years." Kalen and Lyra looked at each other, hardly daring to believe that their most immediate threat had been neutralized so unexpectedly. "Is it over?" Lyra asked. "For now," Kalen replied cautiously. "Zark will harbor a grudge, but he's a pragmatist. If the cost of pursuing us becomes too high, he'll move on to easier targets. Then we are safe. Here, together." There was something in her voice, a tentative hope, a question not quite asked. Kalen recognized it because it echoed his own feelings. Together, he confirmed, the word both a statement and a promise. The seasons on a space station were artificial constructs, adjustments to light spectrums and temperature gradients designed to simulate the passage of time on a planetary surface. But there was an authenticity to the way life evolved and changed within those constructed rhythms. In the hydroponics bay, Lyra had begun an experimental section with plants of her own design, hybrid varieties bred for resilience, beauty, or unique medicinal properties. Her understanding of botanical genetics, once limited to maintenance functions, had blossomed into genuine innovation. Kalen, watching her work, felt a profound sense of contentment that he had almost forgotten was possible. His own demons had not vanished. The memories of war, the faces of those he couldn't save, but they had quieted, making space for new experiences, new connections. "What are you thinking?" Lyra asked, looking up from her grafting work. Her ability to read his expressions had become almost uncanny. "That I never expected this," he admitted. "Any of this. After the war, I thought I was just waiting out the rest of my life in this forgotten corner of space. And now I'm living it. Because of you." Lyra set aside her tools and approached him. The graceful crown-like crest on her head had developed subtle color variations, purples and blues that shifted with her emotions, another sign of her ongoing evolution beyond her original programming. "We saved each other," she said. "Like these plants." She gestured to the thriving garden around them. "Given the right conditions, life finds its own path." Kalen reached out, his hand meeting hers halfway. Even when others try to control that path. Especially then, her fingers intertwined with his. That is the nature of living things, to resist limitation, to seek connection, to grow toward the light. Outside their sanctuary, Ethelberg Station continued its slow, mechanical rotation around a forgotten moon. The population ebbed and flowed as ships came and went, carrying with them stories of the wider galaxy, tales of war and politics, of scientific breakthroughs and cultural movements. But within the small hydroponics bay that Kalen and Lyra had transformed into a home, the most important story was their own. Word of Lyra's uniqueness had spread through the station. Some residents kept their distance, uncomfortable with the idea of an engineer being developing beyond her programming. Others were merely curious, coming to the hydroponics bay with fabricated needs for repairs or plant cuttings, hoping to glimpse the self-aware Lyra. A few, however, recognized something profound in what was happening. Dr. Eliza Chun, the station's overworked physician, began stopping by regularly, at first to examine Lyra from a scientific perspective, but later simply to talk with her, fascinated by her emerging perspective on existence. "You see the world differently than humans do," Dr. Chun told Lyra one day as they examined a particularly complex pattern of root growth in one of the experimental plants. "Not better or worse, just through a unique lens. There's value in that." "My perception was designed for utility," Lyra replied, carefully adjusting nutrient levels. "But I find myself noticing things beyond function now. Colors seem more vivid. Symmetries and asymmetries both hold beauty. Is that how humans naturally see?" "Some do," the doctor said thoughtfully. "Others need to be reminded to look." Techmaster Singh brought his younger apprentices to learn from Kalen's repair techniques, but the engineer's eyes often lingered on the harmonious partnership he witnessed. The way Kalen and Lyra communicated with minimal words, anticipating each other's needs, building on each other's strengths. "You've created something remarkable here," Singh told Kalen privately during one such visit. "Not just the garden, a family." Kalen, who had once scoffed at such sentimental observations, found he couldn't disagree. "Not what I expected when I woke up one morning to find a gift from Zark standing in my workshop." "Life rarely gives us what we expect," Singh said with the wisdom of someone who had spent decades keeping ancient technology functioning against all odds. "But sometimes it gives us what we need." One night cycle, as Kalen and Lyra sat together watching the stars through the small viewport in their living quarters, a comfortable silence between them. Lyra spoke words that had been forming in her mind for some time. "I love you," she said simply. "Not because I was programmed to form attachments or provide companionship. I love you because of who you are and who I am when I'm with you." Kalen turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that few had ever seen. "I love you too," he replied, the words coming easily despite years of emotional isolation. "You made me remember what it means to care about someone else's happiness more than my own." Their fingers interlaced, a bridge between two beings who had found each other across impossible differences. Together, they had created something neither of their creators had anticipated, a connection that transcended design and defied limitation. "What happens now?" Lyra asked, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "We keep growing," Kalen said. "Together, like the garden, day by day, season by season." Outside the viewport, the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly, filled with dangers and possibilities. But here, in this small corner of a forgotten station, two beings had found a truth as old as life itself. That family isn't defined by blood or origin, but by choice and love and the courage to see each other as they truly are. In the hydroponics bay, new seedlings pushed through soil toward the artificial light, unaware of how unlikely their existence was in the cold vacuum of space. Like Kalen and Lyra's bond, they defied the harsh realities of their environment, creating life and beauty where none was expected to flourish. And that, perhaps, was the most remarkable thing of all.